Imagine working for everything you have. Every single dollar. Every single sacrifice. Every sleepless night, every aching muscle, every moment of doubt that you pushed through, alone. Now imagine waking up one morning on the yacht you built from nothing, and finding your parents already inside. Drinking your scotch. Wearing your robe. Rubbing your $800 face cream on their cracked heels like it's the most natural thing in the world. They didn't call. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They just arrived. And the first words out of my father's mouth? You need to move your things to the crew quarters. James needs the master suite to heal. Not hello. Not we missed you. Not even a simple how have you been. Just orders. Entitlement wrapped in a calm voice and served with a glass of my vintage scotch. My name is Vanessa. And this is the story of the day my parents walked back into my life after 3 years of silence, not to apologize, not to reconnect, but to take everything I had built. What they didn't know was that the girl they used to manipulate, drain, and discard? She no longer existed. The woman standing on that yacht knew exactly how to handle a hostile takeover. And they had just walked straight into her trap. If you love stories about people who fight back and win, hit that subscribe button right now. We drop a brand new revenge story every day. Don't miss a single one. Let me take you back. Because to understand what happened on that yacht, you need to understand what happened before it. 3 years ago, I made a decision that most people told me was cold. I cut off my family. Completely. No calls, no holidays, no birthday texts, no nothing. Just silence. People on the outside looked at that and said, how could she do that to her own parents? But here's what they didn't see. They didn't see the day I rushed to the bank the morning after my grandmother's funeral. She had left me $10,000. My inheritance. My start. A final gift from the only person in that family who ever truly saw me. I walked up to that teller with hope in my chest. And she slid the statement across the counter. 0. The account was empty. Withdrawn. Every single penny, gone. The signature on the withdrawal slip was mine. But the loop in the letter V? That shaky little curl? That was my father's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. I had watched him sign his name 1,000 times growing up. When I confronted them, they didn't apologize. They didn't even deny it. My mother looked me in the eyes and said, James has a vision. You just have a hobby. That was the moment something broke in me. Or maybe, something finally became clear. My entire life, I had been the invisible child. The responsible one. The one who didn't need anything because she could handle everything herself. James was the golden boy. The one with potential, with dreams, with vision. I was just the backup plan. The emergency fund. The piggy bank with a heartbeat. So I left. I stopped returning calls. I started from zero, scrubbing decks on charter boats, saving every tip, eating ramen for dinner while James posted photos of bottle service on social media, all funded by money that was supposed to be mine. I built my company from a single salvage tug. I fought for every contract, every crew member, every inch of that business. And over years of grinding, of refusing to quit, I turned that single boat into a fleet. I turned that fleet into a brand. And eventually, I was living and operating aboard the Sovereign, $1 million yacht that I had earned with my own 2 hands. Not once did they call to say they were proud. Not once did they check in to see if I was okay. For 3 years, I was invisible to them. Until the day they needed something. The first thing I noticed when I stepped onto the aft deck that afternoon was Leo. My 19-year-old junior deckhand. He was standing by the gangway, turning his cap around and around in his hands, looking like a boy waiting for a sentence to be read. Miss Vanessa, I'm so sorry, he stammered. They had IDs. They said it was a surprise anniversary visit. Your father, he told me if I ruined the surprise, he'd have you fire me on the spot. And right there, I understood exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. They hadn't picked a lock. They hadn't hacked a system. They had found a scared teenager and squeezed him until he opened the door. That was their specialty. That was always their specialty. Social engineering. Emotional manipulation. Weaponizing other people's fears to get exactly what they wanted. It's fine, Leo, I told him, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were trembling. Go take your break. I'll handle the garbage. I walked back inside. And what I found made my stomach turn. 4 oversized suitcases blocked the entire walkway. My brother James was stretched out on my Italian leather sofa like he owned it, scrolling his phone without a single care in the world. My mother was already flipping through a yachting magazine, mentally redecorating my home. And my father stood at my bar, pouring himself another glass of my scotch with the casual confidence of a man who believed he deserved everything in sight. Get out, I said. All of you. Now. My mother didn't even look up. Don't be dramatic, Vanessa. We're family. You have plenty of room. This is a place of business. You are trespassing on a commercial vessel. My father laughed. Actually laughed. Then he stepped closer, filling my space with the smell of my own scotch on his breath. We raised you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. We sacrificed for you. And now, when the family needs something in return, you want to hoard it all for yourself? That's ugly, Vanessa. That's selfish. And there it was. The twisted math of people who confuse parenting with investment banking. In their minds, raising me wasn't a responsibility. It was a financial transaction. Every meal, every roof, every school year, it was all going into a mental ledger somewhere, quietly accumulating interest, waiting for the day I had enough to be harvested. My success wasn't mine. It was theirs, a return on the minimum they had done to keep me alive. But James? James' failures were a family emergency. His debts were a collective burden. His gambling, his bad bets, his reckless choices, all of that needed to be absorbed by the family. Specifically, by me. Then James looked up from his phone and dropped the number like it was nothing. $148,000. He owed it to a private lender. An aggressive one. The kind that didn't send letters. They sent photographs. Photos of James walking to his car. A quiet, terrifying message that the clock was ticking. My mother stood up, walked to my bar, and poured herself a sparkling water. You can rebuild, Vanessa. James doesn't have that luxury. I want to pause here for a second. Because what my father said next, I need you to really hear it. He called it retroactive repayment. He explained, very calmly, very patiently, like a professor explaining something to a slow student, that after my college graduation, I had lived with them for 1 month while I looked for work. They fed me. They housed me. And apparently, they had been running numbers ever since. Principal plus interest, plus inflation, plus the opportunity cost of supporting me instead of investing that money elsewhere. According to their math, I owed them roughly the same amount as James' entire debt. We're just calling the note due. The air left the room. They had monetized my existence. They had put a price tag on every bowl of cereal, every night I slept under their roof, every single moment of what any normal parent would call basic love. And they had been sitting on that invoice for years, waiting for me to have enough to pay it. I felt something cold move through me in that moment. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter than both. Something clear. I told them I needed to check my accounts. I grabbed my tablet and walked upstairs to the bridge deck, locking the watertight door behind me. And I didn't check my accounts. I made a phone call. Because I had spent 3 years building something they couldn't see. Not just a business. Not just a yacht. I had spent 3 years becoming someone they had never actually met. Someone who had learned from every wound they had given her. Someone who had studied every move they made. Someone who, when this day finally came, and some part of her always knew it would come, was going to be ready. The girl who cried at that empty bank account was gone. The woman standing on the bridge deck was a CEO. And she knew exactly how to handle a hostile takeover. We are about to enter the most satisfying part of this entire story. Share this video right now, your friends need to see this. And drop a comment below, what would you have done in Vanessa's position? Let's talk. 3 blocks from the marina, there was a cigar bar called the Havana. Dark wood, cedar-scented air, old money in the corners. Aunt Morgan was already waiting in the back booth, nursing an espresso, diamond rings catching the low light. She was my mother's sister by birth. But by spirit, by character, by everything that actually mattered, she was a completely different species. A retired corporate litigator. The kind of woman who had gone through 3 divorces and walked away with all the houses. Sharp, strategic, and completely unafraid. I handed her the crumpled demand letter. She read it behind her reading glasses, her eyes narrowing slowly. And then she made a sound I wasn't expecting. She laughed. Apex Global Holdings, she said. Vanessa, this isn't some dangerous underground lender. This is Barry Siegel. He runs a predatory lending shell out of a strip mall in Fort Lauderdale. He terrorizes rich kids into paying double interest. Can we stall him? I asked. Better, she said, already reaching for her phone. Barry owes me a favor from a 1998 merger. I call him right now, offer 60 cents on the dollar in cash today, he'll sell us the debt note on the spot. He knows James is a default risk. He'd rather have 60% of something than 100% of nothing. Do it, I said. Use my operating account. She dialed. I watched her work, her voice dropping into that perfectly pleasant, quietly devastating register she used when she was about to win. 3 minutes later, she hung up. It's done, she said. The wire is pending. As of right now, you own James' debt. We spent the next hour on her iPad. We weren't drafting a check. We were drafting a document. A very specific, very carefully worded document, full of language my family would never bother to actually read. There was a default clause triggered by a recorded admission of insolvency. There was a lien on their assets. There was a foreclosure mechanism that would activate automatically upon signature. It looked like bureaucratic paperwork. It was, in reality, a perfectly engineered trap. By the time we were done, the sun was beginning to set over the water. I sat in my car for a few minutes before driving back to the marina. I fixed a few strands of my hair to look just slightly undone, just slightly defeated. I practiced my expression in the rearview mirror. Soft eyes. Slumped shoulders. The face of a woman who had finally been broken by people who loved her. It was the best performance of my life. And the audience had no idea what was about to happen. They were exactly where I expected them. Perched in my salon like birds on a wire, waiting to see what I'd brought back. James had opened a second bottle of wine. My mother was circling furniture in a yachting magazine with a pen. My father was standing with his arms crossed, swirling ice in a glass. Well, he barked. Is it done? I let my shoulders fall. I let my voice crack just slightly at the edges. I can do it, I said. But there's a problem with the IRS. I watched their faces immediately shift from impatience to calculation. The moment I mentioned taxes, my father leaned in. I explained that moving $150,000 out of a corporate account would trigger fraud alerts. That I needed to structure it as a formal debt purchase to protect myself from auditors. That my board required a compliance recording for any transfer over $10,000. I placed my phone on the coffee table, propped against a vase, camera lens facing directly at the sofa where they sat. Greed, I have learned, is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs the part of the brain that sees danger. My father looked at the phone. He looked at the bottle of wine. He looked at James. And then he sat down like a man about to collect a check. I poured champagne. I apologized. I told them I'd been stressed, that the business was overwhelming, that I shouldn't have been so harsh earlier. I handed them each a glass. They took it. Because alcohol and apology are the two things people like them can never resist. Then I pressed record. I walked them through it carefully. Patiently. Dressed every step of the trap in the language of tax efficiency and audit protection. My father recited his full name into the camera. He acknowledged the debt. He confirmed, with a wave of his hand and a smile, that the family had used my inheritance years ago to fund James' first business. It's all the same pot, he said, almost cheerfully. Family money. He had just confessed to fraud and theft on a recording. And he was smiling because he thought he was helping me dodge taxes. I slid the document across the table. Dense legal language, multiple pages. Nobody read a word. Roger signed. Brenda signed. James signed. My phone buzzed. Transaction complete. Asset acquired. I stopped the recording. The money's gone, I said. My voice was completely steady now. No more trembling. No more softness. But I didn't pay off the debt. I bought it. Silence. You owe me now. I showed them the clause. Their own words, recorded, clear, undeniable, had triggered immediate default. The document they signed without reading contained a lien on their assets. The foreclosure mechanism had already been activated. The house was collateral. The process had begun. My father's face went through about a dozen emotions in the span of 10 seconds. Confusion. Realization. Rage. The glass shook in his hand. My mother's voice hit a pitch I had never heard before. James went completely pale, his expensive wine sitting untouched in his hand. They shouted. They threatened. They called me names I won't repeat. And I pressed the silent alarm. Port Authority officers were on board within minutes. I stood in the center of my salon, completely calm, and said 4 words. These passengers are unauthorized. No argument held any weight. No threat had any power. They had walked onto a commercial vessel without permission and they had no legal ground left to stand on. They were escorted off the Sovereign with the exact same energy they had brought aboard, loud, indignant, and ultimately, powerless. I watched them go from the aft deck. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant in the dramatic way people might expect. I just felt, still. Quiet in a way I hadn't felt in a very long time. 3 weeks later, the court ruled on summary judgment. The lien stood. The house sold. The debt, the theft, the legal fees, all covered. James received a wage garnishment order. 15% of his income for 10 years. When he called me one last time, his voice had none of its old swagger. Just exhaustion and bitterness. He told me I was a monster. I thought about that for a moment. I thought about the $10,000 my grandmother left me. I thought about the teller's face when she showed me the empty account. I thought about the ramen dinners and the aching hands and the years and years of building something from nothing while my family lived comfortably on what they had taken from me. No, I said. I'm a creditor. And I hung up. The Sovereign pulled away from the marina that evening as the sun dropped behind the Miami skyline. I stood on the bridge deck and watched the city grow smaller behind me. Somewhere in that city, the people who had tried to take everything from me were dealing with the consequences of every choice they had ever made. I deleted their numbers. All 3 of them. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. People ask me sometimes, and I've thought about this a lot, whether what I did was right. And I understand the question. She tricked her own family. She set a trap for her parents. There's something uncomfortable about that, something that doesn't sit neatly inside the stories we're told about forgiveness and grace and second chances. But here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. My parents had 30 years to treat me with basic dignity. 30 years to look at me as a human being rather than a resource. 30 years to say we're sorry or we were wrong or simply we see you. They never did. Not once. Not a single phone call in 3 years. Not on my birthday. Not at Christmas. Not when I was building something extraordinary from the ashes of what they had taken. They called the day they needed money. That tells you everything you need to know. There is a kind of love that is really just ownership dressed up in family language. That says I raised you, and means I own you. That says we're family, and means you owe me. That rewards success with extraction and punishes boundaries with guilt. That kind of love is not love at all. It is a transaction with a smile on top. And the most important thing I ever learned, the lesson that saved me, that made everything else possible, was this. You are not obligated to make yourself smaller so that someone who already took too much can take a little more. You are not a dividend. You are not a backup plan. You are not an emergency fund. You are a person. And people have the right to protect what they have built. Vanessa didn't win because she was cold. She didn't win because she was ruthless. She won because she had done the hardest work of all. She had looked clearly at what her family actually was, not what she wished they could be. And she had refused to keep funding a lie. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. Protecting your peace isn't betrayal. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself, is to let people experience the weight of their own choices. The Sovereign sailed on. And for the first time in her life, Vanessa sailed free. If this story moved you, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had to cut off someone close to you to protect yourself? This channel exists for every person who has ever had to fight for what's theirs. You are not alone. We'll see you tomorrow.